Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Let's get started, please.
Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Sahana bhavatu sahano bhunaktu sahaviryam karavavahai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sri Gita Dhyanam. Om Parthaya Pratibhuditam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Puranamunina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshini Bhagavati Ashtadashaധ്യായിനി Amba Tvamanusandharami Bhagavad-gite Bhagavad-dveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravindayata Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Tailya Purnaha Prajvalido Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Putra Vetrekapanaya Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamritaduhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Tukta Gopalanandanaha Partho Vatsasudhir Bhukta Tuktam Geetamritam Mahat Vasudeva Sudam Devam Kamsa Chanuramadhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Bhishma Drona Tada Jayadratha Jala Gandhara Nilotpala Shalyagrahavati Kripena Vahani Karnena Velakula Ashwathama Vikarna Gora Makara Duryodhana Vartini Sotirna Khalu Pandavai Rananadi Kaivartaga Keshavaha Tara Shadhyavachas Saroja Mamalam Geetartagantotkatam Nanakyanaka Kesaram Harikatha Sambodhana Bodhitam Loke Sajjana Shatpareiraharaha Pipiyamanam Mudha Bhuyat Bharata Pankajam Kalimala Pradvamsina Shreyase Mukam karoti vachalam pangum lankayate girim yatkripatamaham vande paramananda madhavam yam brahma varunindra rudra marutaha stunvanti divyaistavaihi vede sanga padakramupanishader gayanti yam samagaha Dhyanavastita tadgatina manasa pashyanti yam yogino yasyantam na vidusura suragana devaya tasmai namaha devaya tasmai namaha devaya tasmai namaha.
Hari Om. Hari Om everyone. So today I'm very happy because I'm at my daughter's place, Varshini. So I'm quite thrilled about that. There she is. Yeah, there she is. And that was her cat, by the way. So
Cat's getting satsang today.
yeah, there are two of them. So Bhagavan has explained to us till now what the three gunas are, how they cause bondage, both indirectly as well as directly, what their various manifestations are, how do we recognize them, how they have this continuous interplay, non-stop interaction between themselves, and as part of that, how one gains supremacy over the other two, and what the signs are through which we can recognize which one of the gunas is more dominant compared to the other two. This is what we have gone through so far in the chapter. So our life is essentially a play of gunas in our mind. That is what it is. But none of these gunas have a permanent sway. Each one has its moment. So the one that is dominant is the one that is having its own time. The others are not having their sway at that time. It's like, just like, they say every dog has its day, right? And our efforts in terms of our agami karma essentially influence which of these we adopt in our life, if you will, as your pet, as our pet. That is what it is, right? And what we adopt, what we help to become dominant is in our hands through our agami karma. One of the aspects of positive optimism in Sanatana Dharma is the aspect, or is the theory of reincarnation of the Jivatma, the Punarjanma. And what is the influence of the gunas on this, on the reincarnation or Punarjanma? And conversely, what should be our effort, our agami karma, our endeavor as part of our agami karma, the endeavors that we have, the efforts that we make, what should they be? And why do we need to understand and know these things, preferably as soon as possible in life, in a human being's life? Is because, see, a doctor, just to give you an analogy, a doctor cannot all of a sudden repair, a subtle problem in a rocket ship. If a rocket ship has crashed or it's going to take off and it's not taking off, there is some issue, the launch has to be postponed. You cannot summon a doctor and say, hey, can you resolve this? You've got 3 hours or 24 hours for that matter. And conversely, you can't get an engineer to wire up the human brain in a manner, that it functions well, or in a manner that it solves a problem or a disease. You cannot do that. This is because these people have been trained probably for a number of years, if not almost throughout their life, to think in a particular manner. Their mind functions in a particular manner based on how it has been trained, the mind intellect, and not only based on how it has been trained, how they have practiced that training through their life. So human life is nothing but a continuity of this kind of a training, continuity of thoughts. And this continuity of the thoughts, it actually exists moment to moment, week to week, day to day, month to month, year to year, and decade to decade. It continues over our lifetime. And from a guna point of view, from life to life, from one life to the other life. And thus, Bhagavan says in verse 14 of this chapter,
Yada sattve pravrittetu
Yada sattve pravrittetu
pralayam yati dehabhrata
pralayam yati dehabhrata
tadotamavidam lokan
tadotamavidam lokan
amalan pratipadyate
amalan pratipadyate
yada sattve pravrittetu pralayam yati dehabhrata tadotamavidam lokan amalan pratipadyate.
Dehabhrata, the embodied one, Bhagavan says, meets with yati, when the Dehabriti, when the embodied one meets with pralayam, death. Yada, sattve, when sattva is pravriddhe or tu pravriddhe, surely, pravriddhe, predominant. Tadaha, then pratipadyate, attains, amalan, pure, spotless. Mala is dirt, amalam, pure, spotless. Lokan, worlds. Uttama Vidam is of the knowers of the highest. So Bhagavan says, if the embodied one meets with death, when sattva is predominant, then it attains the pure worlds of the knowers of the highest. Pratipadyate means attains, reaches. Amalan Lokan, pure, spotless worlds. Uttama Vidam, of the knowers of the highest, those who have the knowledge of the ultimate, the supreme knowledge that Bhagavan has been teaching us through Bhagavad Gita. In the human world, if these people are quote unquote reborn in the human world, they are born in the household of highly accomplished spiritual masters. And this kind of a birth in that kind of an environment gives them the head start in terms of their continued sattvic pursuit, in terms of the soul's journey towards moksha. And otherwise, if they are born in higher worlds, if they have gone beyond the human worlds, and we have studied this, we have studied about Brahmaloka, Shivaloka, Vaikuntha. If they are born in these kind of lokas, then the soul attains moksha or liberation in stages. Salokya, being in the presence of the Lord in the same realm, or Samipya, being in the proximity of Bhagavan in Satyaloka, or in Vaikuntha, whichever loka that we believe in. Sarupya, the identification with Bhagavan is so much, so deep, that the liberated soul acquires the same form as that of Bhagavan. And Sayujya, the liberated soul loses all of its individuality and acquires the same dazzling effulgence as Bhagavan. It's like, my favorite example when I refer to Sayujya is Las Vegas. You have to see Las Vegas at night. It's absolutely effulgent. The lights emanating from the city just light up the sky miles away from Vegas. When you approach Vegas, it is, dazzling. The effulgence increases as you go closer and closer and closer. And because of the desert sky there, it's even more beautiful. And then sunrise. And what happens when sunrise? All this dazzling lights of Vegas just kind of merges into the sunlight. Similarly, the soul that has attained Sayujya merges into the effulgence of Bhagavan. And what is the result when Rajas or Tamas are predominant? That Bhagavan covers in the next verse.
Rajasi pralayam gatva.
Rajasi pralayam gatva.
Karma sangishu jayate.
Karma sangishu jayate.
Tata praleenastamasi.
Tatha praleenastamasi.
Mudhayonishu jayate.
Mudhayonishu jayate.
Rajasi pralayam gatva. Karma sangishu jayate. Tata praleenastamasi. Mudhayonishu jayate.
Gatva means meeting. Meeting pralayam, death. Rajasi, in Rajas. Jayate is born. Karma sangishu, among those who are attached to action. Tatha, and pralinaha, dying. Tamasi, in tamas. Jayate is born. Mudha yonishu, in the womb of the senseless. Meeting death in Rajas is born among those attached to action, and dying in Tamas is born in the womb of the senseless. See, while the higher realms or the lokas, the soul has the right to enjoyment. So in the heavens, the soul has the right to enjoyment. The Sanchita karmas are not exhausted. They come back after enjoying life in the heavens. They come back, are reborn on the earth to exhaust the prarabdha karma that is remaining. Moksha may not have come when you're in the heavens. You go to the heavens, enjoy there and come back. But while in the heavens, all the soul does is to enjoy. And these are depicted in various ways in our Puranas and all, right? But in the human world, in this loka, in samsara, the only right that the soul has is for action. Karma, Bhagavan had said, karmanye vadhikaraste, without any desire for fruits. Mahaphaleshu kadachana. So karmanye vadhikaraste, the only adhikara is for karma. So the only right is for action. And we are indisposed for action. We are just naturally made for action because of our gunas. But what happens is that constant action, again and again and again, day after day after day, minute after minute, week after week, month after month, we keep taking some action or the other, driven by goals that we have in this world. That creates a cycle of joy and sorrow. Nobody, no human being can escape the cycle of joy and sorrow. And more often than not, it is actually you find people in sorrow than in joy in the entire life cycle. When people are in the Rajasic life cycle, Tamasic, they may even be deluded. You don't even know where they are. They don't even know where they are. But in the Rajasic life cycle, more often than not, it creates sorrow, but it's a cycle of joy and sorrow. Remember, joy and sorrow, not happiness. Happiness is that deep, touching the core of a human being, one that lasts everlasting, lasting long. Not that after some time the cycle comes in and you have spent time in being happy and now you have to spend time being sad. That cycle is for joy and sorrow. Happiness that comes through sattvic approach in life or sattvic practice in life is lasting much longer. So this cycle of joy and sorrow keeps happening in Rajas. And Bhagavan says, these kind of people, when they attain death, they karma shrangishu jayate. They are reborn again among people who are attached to karma. Karma for the sake of fruits for themselves. Karma for selfish reasons. That is where they come back. And for those in tamas, Bhagavan says, mudha yonishu jayate. And these people, in case of death while they are in tamas, and we have seen what tamas is earlier, if they are reborn in the planet Earth, in samsara, they are born among the deluded. People who have false beliefs in terms of what they are doing. Or else, they are actually born in lower embodiments. See, the human being is the most evolved of the beings. But those who pass away during tamas actually are born in the lower embodiments. Plant life, animal life, and so on and so forth. Even though a human being life is a privileged one, I want to explain this point because, this is something which may be a question mark in a lot of people's minds, right? See, the fact is that even though we are a privileged part of creation, no other part of creation is as privileged as the human being. Most of the human beings, if you ask them, would you like to be born? What would you like to be reborn as? If you are assuming you believe in rebirth, they will say human being. No one would choose to be an animal or a plant or a stone or a bacteria or something, right? Any other part of creation. So it is most privileged existence. We dominate. That's why the human being actually dominates all other aspects of creation. We don't have any other animal or plant or anything else dominating creation. Human being is the boss. But even though we are the privileged among all of creation, the human behavior is despicable. So taking us back to what Bhagavan had said when he explained the cosmic causal chain in chapter 3 in Karma Yoga, Bhagavan had said that beings, all beings, not just the human being, all beings, they come from food. Basically the seed through which, and the egg through which beings are born is food, nothing but food. That food comes from rain. That rain comes from yajna or sacrifice. That yajna or sacrifice come from karma or action. Karma or action comes from the Vedas. And the Vedas, this Brahma is the source of the Vedas. This is the causal chain that Bhagavan had taught us about. And when he taught us about this causal chain, and I had given you a lot of scientific examples that show even Stephen Hawking talks about exactly the same chain of evolution or chain of universal evolution. And Bhagavan had said that even if one link in this chain is broken, nothing would be there. There would be dissolution. Beings would not exist. They would cease. And that there are two critical components that hold this chain together. The number one is yajna. Yajna means sacrifice or the spirit of cooperative endeavor, where you do things first for the welfare of the rest of creation and then for yourself. Like I mentioned, in Stephen Covey's habit, right? Fifth habit. First seek to be understood, seek to understand, then to be understood. So when you first seek to understand, your actions will be for others, for the benefit of others. When you live life in a manner, in this term, sacrifice, where your actions are first devoted for the benefit of others, and then after that for your own self, that is the spirit of cooperative endeavor. And Bhagavan had said that living in the spirit of cooperative endeavor, you get the maximum. The benefits are much more than selfish action. This is anti-selfish action. And the second link in the chain, which is susceptible to be broken, is action itself, karma, which is the performance of duty. And who are the part of creation that does karma or yajna? So it is the human being. All other creatures are driven by instinct, more by instinct. Human beings are driven by will. That is what enables them to make choices, their personal will, that independent will that we talk about. Ultimately, we'll realize there is no will, but then, yeah, they are driven by will. But instinct-based beings, which, whether it is stone beings, don't even have much instinct, that is very less. Plant beings, animal beings, bacteria, they are driven by instinct. And because they are driven by instinct, they instinctively comply with this causal chain. The human being is the cause for break. The human being, wherever there is break happens, yajna or karma, it is the human being that causes the break. That is why human behavior is despicable as far as creation is concerned. And we see this all around us. In the last few years, from COVID to the Ukraine war, what is it? What is going on? If not miserable sorrow, not just sorrow, right? So human behavior is not only despicable, it is singly responsible for the destruction of this causal chain that Bhagavan has explained. And through our actions, we do that. Through our attitude towards actions, which is not sacrificial, we do that. And whether we believe in future birth or not, Bhagavan is making a very clear statement here. Number one, for the believers, he is saying that he is issuing a carrot and stick policy. He says, lead a sattvic life and you get a better punarjanma. And for the non-believers, he is clearly issuing a warning. He says, you lead a rajasic life to the extreme, or you lead a tamasic life, your future generations will face the consequences. Because an extreme rajasic life or a tamasic life is contributing directly to the destruction of creation. So either he issues a carrot and stick policy for us to follow, for us to make endeavors in our agami karma to bring in more of sattvic element, pursuit, or he says, well, you live the way you live, I have created, but after that, it's up to you. But you are contributing to the destruction of creation. And he puts this mildly in the next verse. Not the destruction, but he talks about the phalam part of it, the result part.
Karmana sukritasyahuhu.
Karmana sukritasyahuhu.
Satvikam nirmalam phalam.
Satvikam nirmalam phalam.
Rajasastu phalam dukkham.
Rajasastu phalam dukkham.
Ajnanam tamasah phalam.
Ajnanam tamasah phalam.
Karmana sukritasyahuhu. Satvikam nirmalam phalam. Rajasastu phalam dukkam ajnanam tamasah phalam.
So Bhagavan says, Ahuhu, it is said. Where is it said? In the scriptures, in the Vedas. It is said in the Upanishads. What is said? The fruit, phalam, of sukritaha, of good karmanaha action. The fruit of good action. Nirmalam, satvikam. Nirmalam, pure. Like we said, without any mala. Satvikam, satvik in nature. The phalam, fruit, rajasaha, of rajas, too, is surely dukkham, sorrow. And the phalam, fruit, of tamas, tamaha, is ajnanam, ignorance. It is said that the fruit of good action is pure, sattvic in nature. The fruit of rajas is sorrow, and ignorance is the fruit of tamas. See, tamas either completely engulfs the person in inertia. So, tamasic person will mostly be, no action at all. Or it induces wrong action, completely wrong action. For example, this Ukraine war is a wrong action. There is nothing for us to, believe that there is any right in that action. So whether it is the Russian president wrong action, or the Ukrainian's president wrong action, or the Americans wrong action, who induced it, who caused it, all of them are responsible. But fundamentally, it is wrong action, tamasic behavior, wrong action induced by tamasic behavior. And this kind of wrong action is harmful to not only the individual, but also to the environment, to creation. Let alone helping with progress. It doesn't help in progress. For Ukraine to come back, it will take years. For Russia to come back, it will take decades. So let alone helping with progress, it is actually harmful. Rajas, by the way, is surely an instrument that can help. So in a sense, it is good. How can it help? Rajas can propel a person out of tamas. To get out of tamas, you need rajas. Sattva will not do much there. It is actually rajas that will be more valuable to get a person out of tamas and towards progress. In that sense, yes, it is good. But what happens is that cycle of action, getting into it, getting sucked into it, driving the human being into incessant action. That nature of continuous action, that is what leads to selfishness. And that selfishness or selfish action further leads to sorrow. So rajasic action, while it helps in terms of propelling one out of tamas, extreme rajasic action leads to sorrow. At the same time, this rajasic action is training ground. Because there is sorrow, once a person is getting into sorrow again and again and again, starts wallowing in sorrow, and then starts questioning what's going on, then the character of the persons gets shaped. And then automatically sattva sets in when the character of the person gets shaped. Sattvic approach comes in, and then that leads to righteous action. So this is the kind of cycle that we see all around us. There'll be innumerable examples, in our lives, in each one of our lives. And sattvic action, the righteous action, which is aligned to dharma, that then results in sattvic nature. And that nature leads to purer results and overall holistic well-being. So it is literally a cycle. But then we also saw that action itself, whatever it may be, okay, whether it is tamasic, rajasic, or sattvic, in fact, there are a couple of questions also. They are impelled by underlying nature, impelled by prakriti. What can I do if I am rajasic by nature? What can I do if I am tamasic by nature? So it is indeed a vicious cycle. The only way out of this vicious cycle is to break it, break this chakravyuh. Since yesterday, I've been thinking about that word, I've still not got it. There is this word where you say you get stuck in that, there's also a book. I'll figure it out sometime. If it clicks to one of you, you please tell me, but yeah. So you get stuck in this vicious cycle. And the only way is to get out of it through our sattvic agami karma. And when we do that, what happens? What is the outcome? That Bhagavan covers in the next verse.
Sattvat sanjayate jnanam
Sattvat sanjayate jnanam
rajaso lobha eva cha
rajaso lobha eva cha
pramada mohau tamasaha
pramada mohau tamasaha
bhavato jnanameva cha
bhavato jnanameva cha.
Sattvat sanjayate jnanam rajaso lobha eva cha pramada mohau tamasaha bhavato jnanameva cha.
Jnanam, knowledge. Sanjayate, arises. Sattvat, from sattva. And cha, even, eva. Lobha, greed. Rajasaha, from rajas. Bhavato jnanam. Bhavato jnanam is read as bhavataha ajnanam. Ajnanam, ignorance. What comes from tamasaha? Ignorance. Pramada, error. Moha, delusion. All of these bhavataha arise from tamasa. Knowledge arises from sattva, even greed from rajas. Ignorance, error, and delusion arise from tamas. So it's a cycle. Sattva is a cycle of pure nature, sattvic nature, knowledge, and happiness. Rajas is a cycle of action, greed, sorrow, and tamas is a cycle of indolence, error, delusion, ignorance. So this vicious cycle. And we have to read these verses carefully. It's very important. Otherwise, we will think that Bhagavan is repeating the same. It happens to everybody. It happened to me also. The same thing coming again and again and again. So it's important that we go through it, think about it a little bit more. All Bhagavan is pointing out is the fact that the cyclic nature of life itself, the nature of life itself is cyclic. That fact, that is what he is highlighting. And we see this all around us, except for people who are fully mature in sattvic approach, in their sattvic life. So those people who are completely, fully mature in sattvic life, they are well established in that pursuit, in that life. They are a lot more stationary. Except for them, life itself is a repetition, again and again and again and again, complete cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle. Repetition of desires and their outcome. Their outcome could be joy or sorrow. Like we saw, rajas results in either joy or sorrow. So that repetition, desire, joy, sorrow, desire, joy, sorrow, or error and the outcome of error, which is the tamasic cycle. So, one of my favorite, I sent you this chart, right, which I had made, right? That's one of the favorite behavioral training models that I used to follow, when I used to take coaching sessions and all those kind of things, is this model called the accountability model. It's a wonderful concept, I just love it. And it explains, it puts it in context as part of our samsaric world. This accountability model teaches us to be personally accountable. See, we are very used to holding other people accountable. You did this for me, you did this for yourself, you did holding personally accountable. That is what this model teaches us. And personally accountable for what? For our situations, for our attitudes and our behavior. My situation, my attitude, my behavior. This is because it is only we, through our gunas, we create what happens to us. We promote what happens to us. We permit, allow what happens to us. At least I can say most of the things that happen to us, if not everything that happens to us. And I can vouch for this, that being personally accountable results more often than not in an increased level of self-esteem. You feel better. even if you are personally accountable and admit a mistake. I was tamasic, and in that situation, I made an error. You admit to the error. Even that leads to better self-esteem, better confidence, better freedom of choice, and more personal power. And accountability, what is it? It is nothing but the ability, the willingness, the courage. These three elements are very important. The ability, the basic capability. If I have to follow my agami karma in a particular manner, whatever my choice is, whether it is tamasic, rajasic, or sattvic, I have to have the ability to do that. I have to have the willingness to do that. And I have to have the courage to pursue. And through these, renew my attitudes and my behavior, change my attitude and my behavior. And that is how agami karma will get altered. Otherwise, it will not get altered. Obviously, it is better to do that through a sattvic nature. And when I superimposed the gunas on top of this personal accountability model, it came out so beautifully. By the way, when I used to use this personal accountability model, I did not study gunas. I had not even studied Bhagavad. I had listened to Bhagavad Gita and all that, but I had not studied it. And it works out so beautifully. A lot of things that modern psychologists, modern scientists, modern artists, a lot of these things, the modern professions that they are discovering, inventing, finding out, we find it's there in the Bhagavad Gita. It's so beautiful. So this personal accountability model, if you go back to that image that I had sent you, it starts at the situation we find ourselves in. And this situation that we find ourselves in is because of rajasic action. We are where we are because of some kind of rajasic action, whatever level of rajasic action it may be. And from that situation, we are there because of that intent that comes from either selfish or unselfish desires. And then we are there in that situation. And when we get out of that situation in the course of time, there are two loops into which we can get into. One of them, and I've specifically put it at the lower part of the 8, you kind of dip lower into the victim loop, or you rise above into the accountability. And if I may say, the tamasic loop, you go below into the tamasic loop, or you rise above into the sattvic. So you are in that situation because of rajasic action. And if you go into the victim loop, this is what typically happens. Okay, you first ignore. And then there is denial. Denial leads to blame. And then goes on to rationalizing. And then resisting. And then hiding. And that's that vicious cycle. On the contrary, if you rise above into the accountability loop, you recognize, then take ownership, do some self-examination, learn from that, embrace what you have learned, and then perform righteous action. And that is a positive loop, obviously. Now, I will give you an example, and I'm pretty sure that all of you can, relate to this example to make, and this is a real life story, by the way. This actually happened in my life. And this happened in my life when I was seeped into, rajasic corporate activity. So, in one of my previous jobs, I used to run, operations all over the globe. And, this was in Australia. I had to go to Australia because one of our big, large customers kicked us out, just threw us out. They said, we cannot use you anymore. So obviously I rushed. I went there, big, large customer, big dent in our revenue, which was one of the biggest goals that we had, right? So I go there, I have a meeting with a customer. It lasts like 4 or 5 hours, but nothing. At the end of it, I walk out dejected, and the customer has said, we have lost. You're gone, we are changing. Okay, and they have other plans. And then I'm sitting in my hotel room there, and I get a call from my boss who's sitting in America, right? My boss is very persistent, very pushy, and I'm like, you are sitting out there, in the US, I'm here in Australia, down under, you have no clue what's going on. So he's going on and on and on, rambling about the impact it will have on the corporate total revenue goals and EBITDA and this and that and all of that, and I'm like ignoring all of it, really ignoring. I know that I was ignoring it. He's speaking, let him speak. But then he is persistent, he is pushing, very, very pushy. So he starts asking me, putting me on the spot, asking me questions. So when he does that, I can't anymore ignore. So I start denying. No, this is not true. No, what you are saying is not true. Denying. Okay. No, we didn't lose the customer because of any of our problem. That leads us to blame. So then I said, no, we did everything perfect. I did everything perfect. The customer is the one who is screwed up. They are wrong. One of the ex-employees is at mistake. Little bit error from our side. That's because that person is no longer there. Blame. And then, no, this guy is too persistent, too demanding. So he keeps pushing me. What is the solution? How can you retain the customer? Then I start rationalizing, no, don't worry about it. I mean, customer will go, customer will come. Yes, this is gone, but I'll figure out something else. Start rationalizing. And no, he says, no, this customer cannot go. And then I start resisting. Come on, Richard, you just keep quiet. There's no point in you continuing. Just, no, this is how it is. Whether you get it or not, I am here, I am running on. You want to come and do it? Do it yourself. Resist, push back. And then he keeps continuing, too adamant and too stubborn. And then I start hiding. I swear to you, I disconnected the call. Okay, I hid. It went, and this call was, I don't know, 2.5 hours. And I went through this entire cycle that is written there. Entire cycle, what I just related. Well, I disconnected the call. And after that, honestly, I didn't feel good. I was not feeling good because we had lost this customer. And then this 2.5 hour call made me feel worse. I slept because I was tired, but I don't know, I may have slept for a couple of hours, woke up, just this thing going on in my mind again and again and again. And as it happened over some time, after completing this entire loop of victim loop, then, I don't know, something drove me to thinking, so what the heck, is there any other way? And that kind of inched me up to the accountability. Is there anything else? Is there anything that I missed? And as soon as that thought came, I recognized the problem, the issue. I started stating facts in my own mind. Yes, this is the issue. This is what happened. By the way, the first thing that I recognized was I had not been to that customer for over a year. I'm supposed to be the one who is leading all of that business. Okay, everything was, all others who were running that business or were doing various jobs were reporting to me. And I had not visited such an important customer, thinking that everything was hunky-dory. More than a year, that's the first thing that I recognized. Then it led to taking ownership. Yes, this is ownership of my faults, ownership of the situation, ownership of everything. I started taking ownership. Then it leads to examining, like a post-mortem analysis. Then I started writing down what are the things which over the period of the last, not just 1 year, but say about 3 years or so, what went right, what went wrong, what is it that we could have prevented, what is it that we could have done better. It's called a post-mortem analysis. It's a beautiful analysis that we do, right? And that helped me learn. It threw up so many new things which I was ignoring, which I was, hiding away from in the victim loop. So it threw up tremendous amount of knowledge. And then it led me to embrace the learning, embrace what I had learned, embrace my faults, embrace my team's faults, embrace the customer's rights and wrongs. And then it led to righteous action. I called for a team meeting. That meeting was another 6-7 hours or whatever. And I went through this entire cycle. First the victim cycle, and because others were also in that victim loop, it took effort to bring them out of the victim loop. But one thing that I realized during this, and that's when I fell in love with this model, see, I can extract myself out at any time. I can extract myself out when I recognize that I'm ignorant, when I recognize that I'm denial mode, when I recognize I'm in blame mode, or rationalizing, or resisting, or hiding. Any point, you don't have to go through the entire cycle. You can bring yourself out of it at any point in time. And when you know that you're ignorant, you can recognize. When you know that you're denying, you can take ownership. When you know that you're blaming, you can self-examine. When you know that you're rationalizing, you can start learning. When you know that you're resisting, you start embracing rather than resisting. When you know that you're hiding, you say that, yes, let me do something which is right, because hiding is not right. So it takes you to the accountability loop. So it's a beautiful concept that helps us lead life in a better manner. Lead life in a manner that gives us more positivity in the way we live. And I have a beautiful story that's coming up, that enhances this point in an extreme situation. We'll talk about that. But when I superimposed the gunas into this, then I saw that when I am ignoring and denying, that is nothing but indolence. Absolute tamasic nature. When I'm blaming and rationalizing, it is nothing, no other reason other than the fact that I am ignorant. And that is the reason I'm blaming and rationalizing. And when I'm resisting and hiding, that's because I'm completely deluded. I refuse to see. My boss was trying his best to explain the points, from a CEO point of view. But I was completely blind to whatever he was saying. I was deluded. I was in my zone, not interested in his perspective at all. And then I saw that when I recognized the real issue and took ownership, that is the beginning of that quote unquote pure aspect, the purity in nature, the positivity. And then when I self-examined, when I did the post-mortem analysis, I learned nothing but knowledge, right? And then when I started embracing the learning as well as the situation and pushed myself towards righteous action, automatically I felt happy. The happiness came. By the way, the happiness was there and I could perceptibly see my entire team was happy after we finished this meeting. 6-7 hours of meeting, okay? We were all happy. We didn't know whether we would get back the customer or not. I just sent a nice email saying, thank you very much, I'm going back, and we realized, and I kind of listed out, it was a fairly long thing. We realized that this could have happened better, okay? And I sent out an email. I never knew the result, but guess what? I got a reply almost immediately saying, we want to talk to you. And long story short, although already it's been a little long, but we retained that customer. So positive action, being in the accountability loop, being in the sattvic loop, results in positivity, results in good things happening around us, for ourselves and around us, results in happiness. There is no question about it. So when we go through the cycle that Bhagavan is telling us again and again, it makes absolute complete sense. It doesn't matter whether it does sense after the Punarjanma or not. If you believe in it, great. If you don't believe in it, great. I'm telling you, it makes a lot of difference in this life. Helps us live a better example, make our life better. So what is the message in all of this? So Bhagavan continues in the next verse.
Urdhvam gachanti sattvastaha
Urdhvam gachanti sattvastaha
madhye tishtanti rajasaha
madhye tishtanti rajasaha
jaganya guna vrittistaha
jaganya guna vrististaha
adho gachanti tamasaha
adho gachanti tamasaha
urdhvam gachanti sattvastaha madhye tishtanti rajasaha jaganya guna vrittistaha adho gachanti tamasaha.
Sattvastaha, those who are abiding in sattva. Gachanti, go. Urdhvam, upwards. Like the accountability loop, which is above the victim loop. The Rajasika people, the Rajasaha, Tishtanti, dwell, remain, Madhye, in the middle. The Tamasaha, the Tamasika, Vrittishtaha, abiding in Jaganya, the lowest guna of gunas. Gachanti, go, adho, downwards. Those who are abiding in sattva go upwards. Those abiding in rajas dwell in the middle. And the tamasic, abiding in the lowest of gunas, go downwards. We had briefly mentioned evolution, in scientific terms, when we talked about Darwin's theory of evolution, the survival of the fittest and all that, Evolution as conceived by Sanatana Dharma is measured by the degree of pure conscious, that deep divinity within. We started our satsang in satsang number 1 with unveiling that divinity within. That divinity is there in all of us, whether it is the tamasic person, the rajasic person, or the sattvic person. The degree to which that divinity, that pure consciousness is unveiled, that is, or in other words, the amount of kshetragya that is seen in the kshetra. That is what evolution as per Sanatana Dharma is. So the whole purpose of our evolution is how much can we unveil that divinity within. In the ladder of evolution, the stone being, we see stones around us. They are also beings, by the way. They evolve, they move, they change due to external forces and internal forces as much as human beings. When you go to Rishikesh, you will find, 10 years before, a stone shape was a little different. Today, that same stone rock where you love to sit and you have sat over the years again and again and again, that shape has changed over a period of time. That happens to all. Himalayas are changing. The Aravalis are changing. All mountains, all, earth itself is changing, right? The atmosphere is changing. So in this ladder of evolution, the stone being has evolved the least and almost completely inert, even though it takes years to change. The plant being, on the other hand, is rooted, is in one spot. It cannot move around. And that comes next. Though we witness some elements of consciousness in the plant being, like the touch me not plant, for example, right? The animal being, on the other hand, we see emotion. In these kittens, some of the pets we have, otherwise, even in the jungle, we see emotion, right? Even in that threatening elephant, massive creature in the jungle, when I sometimes interact with it, or come into proximity of those, you can see a lot more of intellect and emotion and all of that expression. The pure consciousness expresses much more vividly, more clearly. The human being is the most evolved, obviously. And obviously, we can see that this unveiling or this visibility of the human being, this experience of the divinity, of the pure consciousness, is much lower in a tamasic being, reasonably there to an extent in a rajasic being, and much higher in a sattvic being. And what limits the evolution of human beings, even though we are at the top of this evolution cycle, what limits? See, once, as per science, you've become a human being, you're the most important. But what about the human being itself? Can it evolve more? And that is where Sanatana Dharma says, yes, you evolve from tamasic to rajasic to sattvic. Very similar to traversing through a flight of steps or stairs, that those indulging in tamas go down, those in rajas stay at one level, and those in sattva climb up, go upwards. So if we see the Sanatana Dharma evolution model, if we examine it, and I put a table in my notes so you'll see it. If we say what is the established nature of the being, and that results in what kind of thoughts, which results in what kind of actions that are performed, and which results in what outcome. So the established nature being sattva, the type of thoughts is pure, actions performed are noble, unselfish, and the results are high, urdhvam, as Bhagavan says. Those established in the nature of rajas perform have selfish type of thoughts, perform actions which are self-centered, and the result is mediocre, madhye. And those who are established in tamasic nature, their thoughts are impure or they are lacking in thoughts, one of the two. They perform ignoble actions, if they do perform actions, and they go lower. Jaganya, lower. So all this is part of evolution. But now Bhagavan, the third topic, liberation, right? That was topic 3 of this chapter. So what about liberation? Bhagavan has clearly pointed out this binding nature of the all 3 gunas. All of them bind, right? Sattva also binds through knowledge and happiness. We have seen all of that. But we also have seen that while these bind, they are unavoidable. They are there. They are part of creation. There is no way. It is the very first expression of Prakriti. The very first expression is through gunas. So absolutely unavoidable. Not only are they absolutely unavoidable, they are necessary. Any embodiment to live needs these gunas. Without that, it cannot. They are inherent. They are there in all of us. At the same time, they express through various elements of creation, and they are also required. Why required? Because if tamas is not there, how will I sleep? If I don't get enough sleep or rest, how will I be a sattvic human being? Forget about being a rajasic. Action is impossible if I don't get enough rest after a point in time. But even sattva is impossible if I don't get enough tamasic rest. If I am not rajasic, then how will I eat? How will I know what I want to eat? Because that is fulfilling the selfish desire of my body, mind, and intellect. There's no question about it. And if I'm not going to eat, how will I be sattvic at all? So this is a must. You can't help it. Because of creation, you cannot escape it. And because it is necessary, you need it. So something that you cannot escape and something that you need, how do you get liberated from? We should think it's impossible, right? So Bhagavan says that getting free from the direct bondage of the gunas is impossible. And that is how creation is. But it is very much possible to get free of the indirect bondage of the gunas. That is why we talked about direct and indirect bondage. And how do you get rid of this indirect bondage? The indirect bondage is nothing but I am happy. The direct bondage is happiness. The indirect bondage is I am happy. The direct bondage is action. The indirect bondage is I am doing. The direct bondage is the error. The indirect bondage is I made the mistake. So this identification with the guna, identification with knowledge and peace in terms of sattva, identification with desire and action from a rajasic point of view, and identification with error and delusion. That is indirect bondage. And this is what we can be free of. And the non-identification is freedom. This non-identification is mukti or jivan mukti. Mukti or freedom or liberation while being alive. And this is where I want to, I relate so much to this story. Dr. Viktor Frankl. Dr. Viktor Frankl was an Australian neurologist and a psychiatrist, and also most famously a Holocaust survivor. Being a psychologist, he studied his fellow prisoners, fellow Nazi prisoners. And his discovery was that those prisoners, he studied them intimately, and he said that those prisoners who had a positive attitude, who had a good, quote unquote, good. Okay, he said good, he used the word good. I say quote unquote because good is sattva. Good is the accountability loop. So those prisoners who had that kind of attitude, they survived this Holocaust much better, both in terms of the way they survived and also in terms of the number of people who actually survived and the number of people who actually died. Those who became victims of the torture, they died or they underwent much more pain than those who had this good approach, sattvic approach, positive approach. And a couple of my very famous, quotes, my favorite quotes, not famous quotes, favorite quotes of Viktor Frankl, Dr. Viktor Frankl are, and I quote, "Between stimulus and response, there is space. In that space, is our power to choose our response. So that choose, which loop do I go to? So just that little bit pause to choose where I want to go. In our response lies our growth and freedom. Unquote. The second one, and I quote, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Unquote. So how do we change ourselves? From tamasic to rajasic to sattvic. And the third one, and I quote, and this is what Bhagavan says, whatever you are doing to my body. He's talking or he's addressing the assaulters, the Holocaust, the Nazis. Okay, whatever you are doing to my body, not to me. Unquote. And what does the world's first psychologist say? Bhagavan Sri Krishna. We'll see that in the verse 19.
Nayam gunebhya kartaram
Nanyam gunebhya kartaram
yada drishtanupashyati
yadadrishtanupashyati
gunebhyascha param veti
gunebhyascha param veti
madbhavam sodhi gacchati
madbhavam sodhi gacchati.
Nanyam gunebhya kartaram yadha drishtanupashyati gunebhyascha param veti madbhavam sodhi gacchati.
Yada, when drishtanupashyati, one can see that there is, or one who is seeing is beholding. What? None, no, none or no. Anyam, other, none other. Kartaram, agent or doer, one who is doing. Gunebhyaha, than the gunas. So when one can see that there is no other agent, no other doer other than the gunas, not I am doing, it's the guna that is doing. When one can see that, and cha, veti, knows, that knowledge, knows what? Param, that which is higher. Gunebhyaha, than the gunas, knows that which is higher than the gune. So not only does this person know that there is no other doer other than the gunas, but also knows what is higher than the gunas. What is higher than the gunas? That divinity, that self. When that person knows that, madbhavam sodhi gacchati. This person, saha, adi gacchati, attains madbhavam, my nature. When one can see that there is no other doer or agent of action than the gunas and knows that which is higher than the gunas, this person attains my nature. So Bhagavan is making 2 points here. Number one, when one can see that there is none other than the gunas who are the doer, and one rises above the gunas, that's the second point, and knows the real self, such a person attains my nature. Gunebhyaha na anyam kartaram. So who is talking? The vocal cords are talking. Who is listening? The ears are listening. Who is taking this torture that is being meted out on, whether it was the Nazis doing to the prisoners, or whether it is Russians doing to the Ukrainians, or Ukrainians doing to the Russians, whatever is going on, right? Who is taking it? The body. Who is feeling and understanding? The mind and the intellect. And all these are gunas. They are not I, they are not me. The physical body is made up of tamas. The karmendriyas are made up of rajas. The jnanendriyas are made up of sattva. And Bhagavan says, yada drashta. Obviously very, very, very difficult. But when you get into that difficult situation like Dr. Viktor Frankl, if you are practicing sattva, you will be able to do it. The question is whether we can do it when we don't get into that extreme difficult situation. Yada drashta, one who sees in this manner. Anupashyati, one who has got the clarity that comes after understanding. Pashyati, sees, understands. Anupashyati, understands with the clarity. And understands what? That it is all the gunas, within and without. Gunebhyascha param veti, knowing that one's true nature is beyond the gunas. Madbhavam sodhi gacchati. Such a person attains my nature. The Nirguna Brahman, we have studied about Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman. The Nirguna Brahman is beyond the three gunas. And getting into that absolute state, attaining that nature which is similar, Bhagavan says, no, attains my nature, that Nirguna Brahman nature. That similar nature to Nirguna Brahman. That is moksha. That is the goal of life. And Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, and I quote, what are the indications of Ishvara dwelling in the heart of a devotee, that divinity deep within? Just like the dawn is the harbinger of sunrise, selflessness or absence of agency precede the spiritual vision of Ishvara. Unquote. What is this nature that is similar to Bhagavan's? That Bhagavan says in the next verse.
Gunan etan atityatrin
Gunanetan atityatrin
tehi deha samudbhavan
tehi deha samudbhavan
janma mrityu jara dukkaihi
janma mrityu jara dukkaihi
vimukto mritamashnuti
vimukto mritamashnuti.
Gunan etan atityatrin dehi deha samudbhavan janma mrityu jara dukkaihi vimukto mritamashnuti.
Dehi, the embodied, atitya, having crossed, trin, the three, gunas, deha samudbhavan, from which the body has evolved. So the body has evolved, the body, mind and intellect. When we say deha, it includes body, mind and intellect. Has evolved from the three gunas. Vimuktaha is freed from what? Janma, that is birth. Jara, decay or disease. Dukkaihi, pain. Mrityu, death. And ashnute, attains to. Amritam, immortality. So the embodied one, having crossed beyond the three gunas, from which the body is evolved, is freed from birth, decay, pain, and death, and attains to immortality. The body, mind, and intellect evolves from the gunas. It comes from the gunas, and then experiences birth, it experiences growth, it experiences decay, and it experiences death as the gunas and through the gunas. Comes from the gunas, experiences as the gunas, and experiences through the gunas. And all through this process, there is pain. Birth involves pain. Growth involves pain. Decay involves pain. Death involves pain. It's constantly there at the physical level. And sorrow at the mind-intellect level. These are constant companions. And Bhagavan says that one who has learned that one's true nature is beyond these gunas, and one who has stopped identifying, just like Viktor Frankl did, what you're doing to me, you're not doing to me, you're doing to my body. He identified that. He could separate the two. One who has able to do that is freed from all these experiences. This person may be bound to the body, mind, and intellect. The soul is bound till it is bound, till that release comes, till death happens. It is bound. It is bound to the body, mind, and intellect, but it is not bound to the gunas. It is free of the gunas. This Jivatman is called a Jivan Mukta, one who is free from body consciousness, even while dwelling in the body. And Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, and I quote, the body has its birth and death, but the Atman is free of these modifications. The Atman is like the areca nut in its shell. When it is tender, the nut and the shell hold on very fast onto each other. But when it is ripe, the nut separates itself from the shell. In Brahmagyana, the body consciousness drops away. With Bhagavan explaining all these concepts of transcending the gunas to attain liberation, Arjuna now has a question about the nature and the behavior of the Jivan Mukta. So although it's 7:45 here, I think it's 5:45 there. I think I'll finish this because Next week, we'll finish this chapter and we have to do a lot more, right? So we'll finish this verse.
Arjuna Uvacha
Arjuna Uvacha
Kailingay Gunan Etan
Kairlingai String Gunanetan
Atito Bhavati Prabhu
Atito Bhavati Prabho
Kimachara Katam Chaitam
Kimachara Katham Chaitan
Trigunan Ativartate.
Ingunanati Vartate.
Arjuna Uvacha Kailingay Gunan Etan Atito Bhavati Prabhu Kimachara Katam Chaitam Trigunan Ativartate.
Oh Prabhu, Prabhu, the one who has taught me this kind of a magical thing, which is, I understand, very difficult, but I also understand that this is what I have to pursue. That Prabhu, oh Lord. Kair, what are the lingaihi? The lingas means the signs. Etan, of one. Bhavati, who lives having atitaha, crossed over, trin gunan, the three gunas. Kim, what? Acharaha is their conduct. Cha, and katham, how? Etan, do they? Ativartate, rise above, trin gunan, the three gunas. Arjuna says, O Prabhu, what are the signs of one who lives having crossed over the three gunas? What is their conduct? And how do they rise above the three gunas? So Arjuna asks three questions with respect to the person who has gone above and beyond, crossed over the gunas. Atitaha trin gunan, one who has crossed over. Kair lingaihi bhavati, what are the signs with which this person lives? How can one recognize? If I see someone who I can say, oh my God, this person has crossed, who has attained mastery over the gunas. Or I am in the process, or I have myself attained, whether in oneself or in others, how do I recognize this kind of a human being? What a beautiful question, by the way. Okay. Kim acharaha, how does this person conduct herself in the world? In the world where there are other people who are still under the influence of the gunas. So not just conduct, but conduct in the presence of others who are still very much seeped into samsara. Katham chaitan trin gunan ativartate. And how does one cross over and go beyond the three gunas? See, in the second chapter, Arjuna asked some brilliant questions. Okay, in the second chapter, Bhagavan answered his question when he said, with regard to Sthita Pragya, right? And Bhagavan had answered that from the angle of knowledge, Sankhya Yoga, the living and conduct of the Sthita Pragya. Sthita Pragyascha ka bhasha, that time he had asked. Here he is asking this Guna Atita ka bhasha in a different way. One who is firmly established in knowledge. In chapter 12, the same topic was looked at from the lens of devotion. See, in the beginning of the chapter, Bhagavan said, I have taught you the supreme knowledge in different ways. I'm just highlighting a couple of those. In chapter 2, from the lens of knowledge. Chapter 12, the lens of devotion, Bhakti Yoga. The living and conduct of one who has Ananya Bhakti, single-pointed devotion. And now it is looked at from the angle of the gunas, Gunatita, one who has firmly established beyond the gunas. We shall see that in the next satsang, which is the concluding satsang for this chapter. It's a beautiful thing, Bhagavad Gita. In different ways, it teaches us how to get better and better and better in life and live a better life. Hari Om, Shri Krishna.
Repeat today's verses. Chapter 14, verses 14 to 21. Yada sattve pravritte tu pralayam yati dehavrata tadottama vidam lokan amalan pratipadyate rajasi pralayam gatva karma sangishu jayate tata pralinastamasi mudhayonishu jayate कर्मणः सुकृतस्याहुः Satvikam nirmalam phalam, rajasastu phalam dukkam, ajnanam tamasah phalam, satvat sanjayate jnanam, rajaso lobha eva cha, pramada mohau tamasah, bhavato jnanameva cha. Urdhvam gachanti sattvastaha, madhye dishtanti rajasaha, jaganya guna vrittistaha, ato gachanti tamasaha. Nanyam gunebhya kartaram, yada drishtanupashyati, gunebhyascha param veti, madbhavam sodhi gacchati. Gunan etanatityattrin, dehi deha samudbhavan, janma mrityu jara dukkaihi, vimukto mritamashnute. Arjuna uvacha, Kerlingaiस्त्रीन् गुणान् एतान् अतीतो भवति प्रभो किमाचारकतं चैतां त्रीन् गुणान् अतिवर्तते ॐ असतो मा सद्गमया तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमया मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमया Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.
Hari Om, thank you. Any thoughts, comments, questions?
Okay, so I have two things. First thing is this diagrammatic representation is very good. So thank you. Quite easy for me to understand. And the second one is you said a person when they reach at a certain level, let's say sattvic level for lack of better word for me, they still have to deal with the others that are not really aware of what it is or what they need to be and all that. So what do you think would be the ideal response, or let's say an ideal way to deal with the others that are not in a certain level? And won't that be exhausting?
That's the question, right? Arjuna's question. Kimacharaha.
Yeah, I know. I'm asking, won't that be exhausting?
Sorry, won't that be exhausting? You'll find out in the next satsang.
No, the thing is, I'm not really saying it's the ultimate level. That's something that I'm not even aiming at. Let's say there is an understanding, a slight understanding of how it has to be. But there are still the others.
See, I'm not claiming that I've reached that level, and I don't think I have. But I can tell you, at least theoretically, I know those who have reached at that level, those who are operating fully out of that sattvic level, they don't even think who is at other what level. You know, for them, there is divinity in others also. So that is where they come from. So they come from the yajna attitude, the spirit of sacrificial endeavor, the spirit of working for others first before. So the minute you start thinking, I am at this level and they are at that level, you're rajasic, you're not sattvic. So one who is actually sattvic is not even thinking like that. So when you're not even thinking like that, it's easier to understand or easier to be with or respond to or react to others who are at that level. That is my answer. I'm not getting into what Bhagavan is going to answer Arjuna now.
Okay, yeah. Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
Actually, I have also a question.
Yes.
I really much like this, what you, this drawing, what you sent us about the accountability. And I was wondering if one can use it also in case of like more personal issues. You gave us the example with the corporate things, but I was wondering if I can use it also for me if I have something, if I'm repeating some samskaras all the time and things like that. and when I go directly to the learning and embracing, and I feel like this embracing, it's not such an easy thing, you know. It's not like it's not only intellectual embracing, right? It must come on many levels. And I was wondering, you know, for me, there are two aspects. One is this absolute acceptance and acknowledging, and then must come like integration and transformation or something, which is not something I can do. It has to happen by itself, right? But it's not sure that it happens. And I feel like, so I can be happy if I transform something, but it doesn't have to happen necessarily. And I was wondering I was thinking, for me, maybe even more important is this awareness that I have choices, and I take consciously choices. But then I maybe I'm not happy with that. You know, this happiness maybe doesn't apply, but maybe if you can use the word wisdom, maybe, you know, in this case. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I think I do. See, on the first part, absolutely, it works in every level. You know, work. It works for the human being, whether the human being is at work or whether at home. You know, it works at a personal level. This, you know, the accountability model, you know, or the gunas model, right? It works. It works for personal issues also, not just official issues. I mean, I can think of examples for myself, but yeah, I mean, I took a lot of time today anyway, but yeah. So yes, it works at every level, and it also works. It helps you take better decisions in life. You know, helps you take decisions in the first place. You know? So yes, it does work at all levels. On your second point, I don't think I clearly understood what you were saying.
Yeah, I was wondering if the goal is to be happy or always happiness, or if it's just that I am aware of these choices, and maybe it's like, maybe I'm more mature, but not necessarily happy with this, but I'm aware.
See, the whole point, and as Viktor Frankl's story exemplifies, right, is the disassociation between the external and the internal, right? So what you're talking about is, I'm not happy with something which is outside. So once you disassociate, then something which is outside is not influencing your being happy or unhappy. You know, or rather, I should not say happy or unhappy. Something which is outside is not in any way influencing your happiness. So that disassociation is what Bhagavan is talking about. Right?
Okay, so it's like more like inner peace than.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, but it's a hard job again. So thank you for that.
Any other thoughts, or comments, or questions? Okay, if nothing else, then what is it? Yeah, I know Subha had. Yeah, that's true. I think Bhagavan touches through the teaching of gunas. He touches important aspects of both life skills in all aspects of life. That is true. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, if nothing else, then thank you. Hari Om. We'll meet next Saturday and conclude chapter 14. Hari Om all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.